Taylor Morgan, welcome to this one time on Psychedelics, man. I'm super excited to have you here. We did a great show on your show, I think on Monday. And now we're on Friday, dude. Excited to swap seats. And so, dude, one of the questions I always ask at the beginning of this is how you first became interested in psychedelics. Because you have a military background. You're obviously fit as fuck. You do a lot of highly optimized type things, the captain's lifestyle. So how does someone like that find a place where psychedelics fit into their life?
Yeah, good question. I had really zero interest in psychedelics up until after the Marine Corps, when I started diving into personal development and hearing more about how psychedelics can play a role in that growth, whether that's through, the ego dissolving through a hero's dose of mushrooms, or I wasn't aware of the benefits of cannabis until very recently. And that's why my interview with you was so profound and excited to dive deeper into that. But yeah, it really wasn't until, what would this have been, like 2017, 2018, when I really started listening to different podcasts, like Ben Greenfield at the time he had endorsed psychedelics. Since then he has retracted his endorsement with psychedelics, which, to each their own. Yeah. Right. But that's what really got me started into this, is understanding the different realm of possibilities that psychedelics can open up, because it really can show you these new worlds out there. There is no one objective reality. There's how we are experiencing it. And then I like how you describe it as psychedelics allow you to peek through the veil and see what else is out there.
100%. They allow you to, at least in my, experience, they allow you to get a wider perspective over the fact that we are in this illusion of separation. And so what that means is that, you've heard a lot of like gurus and people like that talk about we're all one, and that's great as an intellectual concept, but having the direct experience of that, whether it's through religion, spirituality, exercise, whatever it comes through, is extremely valuable, I found, in the human experience. And I found one of the most conducive ways to get there, and the most effective and efficient ways to get there, is through psychedelics. Now, it doesn't mean it's always going to happen, but it means that if you're in the right set and setting with the right people, the right dose, etc., if you're well informed, you can definitely have that experience. And for me, my most jaw-dropping experiences with psychedelics have always been that simple thing, right? Realizing we're all one, and then coming out of that, realizing that, like, when Rachel and I get in an argument, it's not, oh, this person's an asshole, right? It's, oh, this person's going through their own subjective experience of life, and maybe I'm coming off a certain way that I can look into and figure out why this person is having a challenge with me right now. And so it helps me point the finger back on myself, which, accountability and ownership are talked about a lot. And I think most of the way that it's talked about kind of makes it sound like homework. But for me, what accountability and ownership have allowed me to just point the finger at the only person that's going to be able to actually change it. And with the captain's lifestyle, you're very much about that as well. And so I'm curious for you, like, how psychedelics have helped shape your business, if that's even a thing that's happened. Because I don't know if it's a thing, but I'm always curious to ask, because I know for me, being highly optimized, definitely psychedelics are part of that. They're not the entire equation by any means, but they're definitely a part of it. And so have there been aspects of your psychedelic journeys that have informed you moving forward with the captain's lifestyle and everything you're doing now?
Yeah, not directly. I've had some experiences with marijuana and psilocybin and MDMA, and recently LSD, that have definitely helped. Every single experience I've had in my life has led me to this moment now. So of course they've, not necessarily directly impacted it, but started to in those experiences. I recently, so at my immersion, which happened like 3 weeks ago, I had Chase and Dave give as we have a weed whacker outside. So if you hear any interference, there's yard work
some serious yard work here right now, guys.
It's important. So yeah, I had Chase and Dave explain setting an intention behind these things, because for a lot of the guys who attended the immersion, they had either never done psychedelics of any kind, or I imagine some of them had this dogmatic view as they are bad and they are for partying or being lazy or just having fun or whatever.
Burning out, degenerates.
Exactly. So I wanted, because going throughout the weekend, some of the guys were smoking, and then we were going to do a little bit of psilocybin on the last day. And I got Chase and Dave to give a talk on setting an intention and how these things can be beneficial, like microdosing with psilocybin, how that can be good for, depression and anxiety, and how cannabis can be used intentionally. So I had them give a talk to the guys. And then after that, they were all very curious. And we had some guys try psilocybin for the first time, a microdose. And so that allowed them to open themselves up more to enjoy the experience of that night. So that is how I just recently started to incorporate psychedelics. And I plan on doing that more intensely in the future. Like I said, I would love to have you as a guest speaker at one of the immersions to really, really dive into this.
Oh, yeah. Dude.
So yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, it's so fun, dude. Like intention, to me, that term kind of loses a lot of people, especially men. They hear intention. What's your intention? And they're like, what is this woo-woo bullshit, right?
Yeah.
But how I always say it, especially the men, is it's giving a direction in the experience. It's you giving your end of the bargain. I might have said this in your podcast, but it's like when you're playing Texas Hold'em, you can't even sit at the table if you don't have a buy-in, right? And you don't throw in the pot. And so like your intention is that buy-in. And so for me, like it's simply when I realized that intention wasn't something I had to do to be ceremonial or anything like that. It was literally the number one thing that allowed me to pull what I wanted from the experience. It might not be in the way I thought I was going to receive it, but it allows me to take something back, contextualize it, and then integrate it into my life. And so for me, it's like setting a direction. It's giving the plant, the medicine, whatever you're working with, a direction from which to work within. Because I don't feel it's the plant's job or the fungus's job or whatever you're interacting with. I don't feel like it's its job to figure out why you came there. And I think that's where a lot of people become anxious or paranoid or any of these things because they didn't do their due diligence before they entered the experience to, first of all, become self-aware enough to realize, am I actually in a place where this will be beneficial for me? But also, why the hell am I even going into it?
Let me ask you a question on this. Do you think that it's more important for men to set an intention when they're going to connect with cannabis because it is more of a feminine plant? Because I saw one of your posts on Instagram saying that it is not the marijuana that makes you lazy or unproductive, right? It's just that's you that's being
projected out.
Exactly. So, and because masculine energy is more directed and feminine energy is more kind of flowy and, do you find that it's more important for men to set an intention when they're going to connect with that?
It's a really good question. I'd have to do some research to see if because what I've noticed is both sexes or both genders really benefit from an intention. That being said, I will say that with cannabis, and I imagine many others and other medicines as well, women sort of get it already. Right. Like they kind of get it. Like when I mention intention, when I mention connection, they're kind of like, oh yeah, I know how to do that already. Right. Whereas men, sometimes it's a completely foreign subject.
Yeah.
Now, the funny thing is that most men already know how to do this. They just might not have framed it in the ways that I'm talking about it. And so like, for instance, when they're at a business meeting or when they're hopping on a podcast, right? Like they're connecting, they're building rapport, they're doing all these things. Yet they just never thought to do it with a plant because it's more of that linear thinking. Whereas women, they kind of look at all of life. This is a generalization, of course, not every woman, but like when I look at Rachel, for instance, like with her and intention, she's always been able to dance in that space a lot easier than I have. It took me a while getting reps in to really start connecting whatever, my masculine energy, my ego, whatever, to be like, oh, there is actually a really good result that comes from that. And if it's the ego talking, it's like, and it makes us look cooler. So it's like, let's do it. That's a really good question, actually. I haven't dove into that before, but that's a good research study. I had someone ask me recently, if you had an unlimited amount of money and you could do any study on cannabis, what would it be? And I was like, fuck, so what I decided was like, well, I want to see how many people are abusing cannabis, and that would be a really challenging thing to do. But in the perfect world, that's what I would do. But now I actually think that might be the thing I would do, which is like, how does intention work between masculine energy and feminine energy? And where is it most beneficial? Because I imagine both energies or both sexes, genders, whatever we want to talk about it, I believe they both benefit. Yet women are much more connected to the earth. They're much more connected overall from at least who I've worked with. I imagine you'll agree too. Yeah. Whereas men, we're just out there fucking brooding, like we're berserkers. We're out there hunting. We're doing our thing. And I think that's one of the things that the lack of rites of passage have really fucked with men a lot on, because we used to be taught these things. because it isn't exactly natural for us. Like it is natural, but we have other energy that's more natural. But I think that lack of rites of passage is why I think a lot of men are actually getting into psychedelics, because it's kind of this stand-in rites of passage thing too. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, like this whole lack of rites of passage and psychedelics and everything.
Hey everybody, I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show.
Yeah, the lack of a set and structured rite of passage in America today is what I imagine to be at the base of all problems that we're experiencing in today's society. Because
Agreed.
without the rite of passage, men never become men. So
They're boys that are in adult bodies.
Exactly. and this was me up until very recently.
Yeah, likewise.
So without that challenge, there's a lot of things that come from that. There's comfort. We just get addicted to comfort, and we're complacent in whatever it is that we choose to do. So we settle for a job that we don't necessarily like, but it's good enough, right? It pays the bills. Same thing in relationships. We oftentimes settle for a relationship that we know is not deeply fulfilling, but it's good enough.
It's safe.
It's satisfying. Well, safe in in
it's
quotes,
a false sense of safety.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so
a thirst trap, if you will.
Yeah. And so because most men have never had to go through that challenge, they're afraid to go into the unknown. Quitting your job and starting your own thing is the unknown.
Yeah, it can be terrifying.
Breaking up with your girlfriend or getting a divorce is absolutely going into the unknown. That's some scary challenge that a lot of men have not had to face. And so they don't know if they trust themselves enough to be able to come out of that challenge better on the other side. So instead, they settle for their mediocre, average, good enough life because they're afraid to face the challenge, the unknown of what could potentially lead to a great life. So yeah, this lack of rite of passage, that's only one of the aspects that this is leading to, is men have gotten too comfortable.
100%.
And when men aren't leading lives of purpose, they distract themselves with pleasure.
Dude, I heard that quote somewhere and I loved it because I was like, whoa, I feel attacked. Like there was a time in my life where I was like, holy shit, that really applies to me.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool to mention too, is that, a lot of times when I podcast, I imagine some people might think, oh, this guy's figured this out. By no means have I figured this out. And I imagine you'd say the same thing, right? We're just actively in the process of continuing to figure it out, because I don't think we ever figure it out. There's never a point where we're done with the work, if you want to like quotation mark that, or any of these things. Yet it's an adventure, right? It's something that we're diving deeper and deeper into with layers. And psychedelics work very similarly. Like I heard Hamilton Souther talking about this, like when you first get into psychedelics, normally the intention, whether it's conscious or unconscious, is I'm living in discomfort and I'm seeking something different, right? I wouldn't even call it comfort at that point. Then at a certain point, maybe that person ends up realizing like, oh, I'm needing healing, right? So these first journeys are maybe the first couple are like just curiosity, and then it becomes healing at a certain point. But then there's a point where you dive down deep enough where it's not like you stop healing, but you're not like, that's not your main intention, right? Like you're like, okay, I'm in a pretty good spot. Now I'm curious again. Now I'm looking to explore. And so I think that like with anything you look at, especially when it comes to masculinity, but even feminine energy too, there's levels to everything. And I think that for me, what I found is that psychedelics were my stand-in rites of passage. Now, were they rites of passage in the way that like we really think about them? No, but they were like a same, but very different type thing for me, where I went into that unknown consciously. I chose to take something that was going to completely change my lease on reality, and I didn't know what was going to come from it, but I chose to have the faith going through it. And so I think that that can be a rite of passage in certain ways. But the challenge is that with great power comes great responsibility. And many people just don't know what they're fucking with when it comes to psychedelics. And you take like the average male with an alcohol mentality, and then you apply that to psychedelics, yikes. Right. Because then it's like a pissing contest of who can eat more mushrooms or who can take more acid. And we both know, right? Like that is not the realm to have a pissing contest in, because at best, you're going to come out like just feeling a little traumatized. At worst, you can fracture your psyche and go through a bunch of shit, you know? And so I think that one of the main reasons I'm so passionate about educating people with this podcast, with Connect with Cannabis, is because I know the potential of these medicines to do amazing things. But I also know the potential for someone to fuck themselves up by going into these medicines too challenged, you know, in their life, and not having the space from which to integrate, not having the, like, for instance, if you're one of those guys you were talking about, right? And, you know, we're calling out men a lot here because we're both men, so we can talk about it. But I imagine women have their own flavor of this too. But if you're a man who's in a relationship that maybe you've convinced yourself is a good one, but you know deep down it's not really the best one. You're at a job that you've convinced yourself is good for all the reasons your ego is rationalized for, but really in your soul, you know you're burning for something else. And then you go into a plant medicine experience and you do a high dose psychedelic, and you think it's all going to be fun and life, you know, light and love and all this kind of stuff. You know, those are the times where those are the people I get worried about, you know, because that's like, you could have a full on breakdown. And the great thing is that breakdowns lead to breakthroughs. But if you don't have a place to contextualize that, that's where it gets challenged. And that's why I'm so big on attention, because if you know why you're going into it, well, then you can almost weather any how, you know? So when you're going through it, if something challenging comes up, you can at least have an anchor with that intention to relate it to. And that's why I love intention so much. And I think that, you know, psychedelics can be a training ground for life. And that's what I'm really big with cannabis. You know, it's a little more challenging with mushrooms and things like that because you're not doing them as often, right? But cannabis is that thing that many people are using every day unconsciously. So if I can just take someone who's an everyday user and just have them start making intention, well, now they're starting to notice, because they're using a plant medicine, like, oh, when I make an intention, I get what I want. Well, what if I did that on food? What if I did that before I had sex? What if I did that before I started talking to a new romantic interest? You know, like it starts applying, because how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yep.
It's really important.
Yep, exactly. One of my favorite quotes is from Viktor Frankl, a man who, or maybe it's I'm going to butcher the exact quote, but a man who has a strong why can deal with any how.
That's where I got that. I didn't know where I got it from, but I knew I stole it from someone fair and square. So thank you, Viktor Frankl.
Yeah, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning.
Yep.
And I just interviewed Nate Baumgartner yesterday, you know, in Nate Flow, and he mentioned a psychedelic experience that he had where he was basically in the position that we were just talking about. He was working a job that at the time he thought he wanted, but something was missing. And he did a large dose of, I think it was psilocybin, and he saw himself in the mirror at age 80, he said. And this 80-year-old version of himself that he saw was the version of him that stayed in this corporate job that he wasn't fulfilled in. And now he's looking at his 80-year-old self filled with regret that he didn't live his purpose. And that for him was the turning point to start these things. So yes, absolutely, psychedelics can be a profound experience and a rite of passage. Because seeing that, I always say that regret is the worst emotion or experience that you can have.
Dude, right after shame.
at that point, when you are 80 or on your deathbed, there is nothing that you can do.
You can't buy more time with all that meaningless money you made.
No. So the fact that he was able to have that experience before the fact is game changer. And you don't have to do psychedelics to have that. This is why in my program, the whole first month is spent building what I call your MVVP, mission, vision, values, and purpose.
Hell yeah.
So visioning that end goal, this version of yourself that has accomplished everything you want to accomplish. What is the legacy you want to leave? What is the impact you want to have? And really feeling that. And once you can understand that, then you think, okay, is this job that I'm working right now, is this relationship that I'm in helping me achieve this higher purpose? or is it not?
Or is it a distraction?
Exactly. If it's a distraction, I just made a post about this today because Kyle interviewed me on his show, and something that was brought up is, are you delaying the inevitable? So if you know that you are in a job that you don't like, in a relationship that is not 100% full fuck yes, then the more that you delay the inevitable, the more that you are delaying your progress. So the sooner that you can rip off that Band-Aid, as painful as it will be in the moment, the closer you will get to actual fulfillment.
100%. It's like the difference of just touching the hot stove or like hovering your finger close enough to it so you're getting a slow burn for fucking years, you know? It's like, just fucking rip
like,
the Band-Aid
why are
off.
you torturing yourself?
Yeah,
like,
dude.
Just get it over with.
Yeah. And I love what you were talking about the MVVP because, you know, for me, one of the first things I have my clients do is write their own eulogy, you know? And I find that's very similar because it's like, okay, let's picture that you're dead. You're in a coffin. How do you want people to talk about you? Right?
That's one of the exercises that I have them do.
Dude, it's so powerful.
Picture everybody you love at your funeral. Think about and write out what your, hopefully not your parents are going to say, but if that was the case, what would they say? What would your best friend say? What would your wife say? How do you want people to remember you? And from there, they start to craft their mission statement, which I call your treasure map. Because if you follow that, it's going to lead you to life's ultimate treasure, which you get to decide.
Yeah, dude.
Core values, I call your compass directions. Because if you follow your compass directions, your values, that's going to lead you to where you want to go.
Yeah. They're your everyday anchors, right? Like, you know, when I went through Alpha Hippie, they had us do our values for personal, relationship, and business. So then it was like any decision I make, it's filtered through those 3 to 5 core values and the ways in which I frame them in my personal, relationship, and business lives. And I think that's so important because we've never lived in an area or a time where there's been more distraction and more information. And so it's so easy to get caught in the thirst trap of like listening to what other people say and then taking it on as your own experience of life. And I think that's one of the quickest ways to externalize your power and just disempower yourself overall. And so at least knowing what you stand for, you can then actually have a framework from which to live your life through. And it's so important. It's something that's not nearly done enough.
Yeah. The importance of knowing yourself and not living anybody else's life and not living not living to satisfy anybody else's projected view or purpose onto your life. So we are programmed to, you know, the typical American dream, you know, go to college, get good grades so you can get the corporate job, so you can work your way up the ladder, and then you can retire at 65 and, well, I missed the part, find a wife and get 2.5 kids in the house, and
white picket fence.
Then you'll be happy. No, that's
if this then that thirst trap.
Yeah, that's not how it works. Another thing that you mentioned is adventure, which is actually one of my core values. I think a lot of men, this is a fact that I've witnessed, a lot of men have forgotten their sense of adventure. Dude. I think intuitively, all men, at least to some extent, have this deep, ingrained need to explore and to go on adventures. And going into the unknown is the ultimate adventure. You think of guys like Christopher Columbus, like he had no idea what he was getting himself into. He literally got on a ship and sailed out into the unknown, not having any idea if he would even survive. That is what we are missing, is that sense of adventure. And I think that, again, that comes through consciously sitting in and overcoming challenge. And we can do this through a multitude of ways, you know, through the immersion I'm creating to be a sort of rite of passage. Day one is all about overcoming the victim mentality and embracing challenge. We have, you know, we talk about story work and rewriting the programs that we're telling ourselves, and then doing things that they never thought they would be able to accomplish. Like I have a 62-year-old client. His name is Steve. When we first started working together about 3 months ago, at the time he had recently gotten a divorce, and so he's having this identity crisis. Like, who is he? Like, what how can he lead a fulfilling life now, because everything has been shifted? And he was at the time scared to take cold showers, And we started working together. He started becoming more comfortable with cold showers. And then at the immersion, he took his first ice bath. Then day 2, took another ice bath. So he's starting to get comfortable with this new version of himself. Oh, maybe I can do these things that I thought that I would never be capable of. And then on the 3rd day, we did a test with breathing through these bamboo straws submerged under the ice. So it's not just enough to get into the ice bath. Now we're going deeper, right?
Figuratively and literally.
Yes. So Steve spent 7 minutes submerged under the ice bath, breathing through a bamboo straw.
That's a long amount of time too. If anyone doesn't know ice bath, 7 minutes is a fucking gangster amount of time.
and submerged. And at this point, it was the longest that anybody at the immersion had done. People had gotten 30 seconds. Some guys got a minute. Some guys got 2 minutes. Steve just fucking knocked it out of the park and got 7 minutes. And when he came up, we were all standing around. He didn't know this because when he got in, there was nobody around. So when he got out, we were all standing around cheering for him. And the look on his face when he came up from that ice bath, I saw something unlock in him. He is realizing his potential. He is capable of anything that he wants to do. So to see that switch in him was life-changing for me, and it was certainly life-changing for him. And then we granted him the name Captain 7 Steves, a play on the 7 minutes he spent under and the 7 C's.
Dude, I love that. I'm a huge fan of play on words, so game recognized game with that one.
High Diaz.
Yes, dude, high Diaz, bro, dude. Well, it's so fun, dude, and this is a really awesome conversation because what I always want these podcasts to be is not just stories about, our time in psychedelics, and we'll get to some of your stories for sure, but who we've become as a result and what we've been able to take from this space and been able to create from it. And I think that for all of us, even people who listen to this and maybe have never done psychedelics, right? Like you're already doing hard, challenging stuff, most likely in one area of your life. If you're listening to a psychedelic podcast, chances are you're a little out there compared to the normal reality, right? And that's great, right? Because again, what I always tell people is that I don't care what you believe. I don't care if you're vaxxed, unvaxxed, whatever, so long as it's your choice. The one that you researched, the one that you made for yourself, right? And so when it comes to psychedelics, I tell everyone, you don't need psychedelics to get any of these things. You could do a long ice bath. You could do combo. You could do any of these different things that are challenging. You could do high intensity workouts, right?
But speaking of the ice bath, I spent 20 minutes under the ice bath breathing through the straw. And for me, that is a very euphoric and meditative experience. Because you're present
and you're in the eye of the storm. The eye of the storm is calm.
If you're under the ice bath or anytime really, if you're not present, that's when depression arises. That's when anxiety arises. Either trying to relive the past, reminiscing about what could have gone right, or worrying about what could potentially go wrong in the future. None of which are happening in the now.
Exactly.
So under the ice, if you do that, you're going to freak out and you're not going to be able to stay under there. You're gonna, and scared, get out. So you're forced to breathe, my tattoo, breathe, and stay present. And I'm able to get into that meditative, blissful state. So for me, especially after the sauna, doing the contrast therapy, for me, that's very, it's similar to a psychedelic experience.
Oh, 100%. I mean, the ice alone, when I'm in Boston most of the time. And so my buddies host this event called Ice and Iron. And we do it all year. So in January, February, we're doing ice baths. Sometimes it's snowing out when we do it. Nice. You got to kick your feet through the ice. Sometimes the hose lines freeze and Eddie's got to warm the hose up for the water to even come out. It's a whole fucking adventure. Yet it's so fun to watch everyone come there with different levels of experience. People at a ice bath, let's say hundreds of times, people it's the first time. And everyone goes in and it's an equal playing field because even the person's gone in hundreds of times, they still have an equal opportunity to fall into that anxiety, that depression, etc., and lack presence. And the person that's the first time, same ability, right? So no matter where you're at, it allows the playing ground to be level. And I feel it's that same way with psychedelics because even people like Hamilton Souther understand, and he's done, for people who don't know, he's done ayahuasca probably over 2,000 times now, right? So that's aggressive. I mean, that's what you do when you're training to be a shaman, right? Like what he stated was that the elders in the village he was training at, because he's been training for 20 plus years down there, didn't even take him seriously until he had done ayahuasca 1,000 times. And that's when they started actually having the conversation with him about, okay, potentially you being a medicine worker and a shaman, and so it just goes to show, like, with anything, the thing that separates an amateur from a professional, and this might not apply with psychedelics. I don't want to tell people to do more reps, right? Get more reps. But the thing that separates an amateur from a professional is the reps. Now, in psychedelics, that's not necessarily taking the medicine. That's the work you're doing before and after is the reps that I'm talking about, right? The PEAK peak experiences are just 10 to 24 hours max of the experience. But then you have the rest of your life after, and you've had the rest of your life before. So it really comes down to like, how, when I talk to people about psychedelics, it's like, cool, well, what practice do you have to actually contextualize these experiences in? Because if you're someone who is not doing breath work, meditating, ice baths, working out, doesn't have some sense of like drive in your life, well, then at best, these experiences are just going to be a dream that fades. At worst, you could just be fucking with your lease on reality, And I say all the time, there's nothing cool about psychedelics. There's nothing that someone has to do these things, right? But they are something that if someone is looking for a factory reset on their experience of life, they could be one of the things that leads to that. I'm not going to say they can be or they will be, because that comes down to the individual and how much he or she has done the work beforehand and after to make sure they're not only setting the intention and knowing why they're going into it, but how they're integrating the effort too. And I'm curious for you, as someone who knows integration really well, as someone who sets intentions, as someone who does all these types of things, what has been your best or most profound, I'll say, PEAK peak experience with plant medicines that you've had thus far? Now, this could also be the most comedic, the one that's just illuminated the most for you. Like, what is the one that comes to mind that you'd like to tell right now?
Yeah, let's take it back to the moment that started it all. My complete 180 from where the life that I was living to really the beginning of how I started to live the captain's lifestyle. This was when I was in the Marine Corps. I was 21 and I hated my life at the time. I was borderline depressed. When I would go home for leave and get to spend time with family and forget that I was a Marine for a little bit. And then on the plane ride back to base, I was empty. Oh man, that was one of the worst feelings I've ever experienced. Just this deep sense of like not even caring if the plane crashed,
like a void.
Yeah. And so on the weekends, I would again try to forget that I was a Marine. I would stop shaving sometimes on Thursday night, because we'd all have to be clean shaven, fresh haircut all the time. And so I'd like stop shaving Thursday night sometimes and try to avoid people so they wouldn't see me and call me out on it. So on the weekends, I'd have a little bit of stubble, a little bit longer hair, so I could go out in society and pretend that I'm a normal person living a normal, happy life. And that involved drinking most weekends. And this one time, I went to a CrossFit party with my other CrossFit friends. We rented a beach house in San Clemente, California.
Dude, San Clemente, dude, one of my favorite towns in California.
Beautiful.
Dude. Such a cool place.
Beautiful. So yeah, we were on this literally beach house, like on the beach, this whole row of beach houses, the whole street, super nice place. And I got blackout drunk as usual. And this was the first time that I had consumed marijuana. So I took a few hits from my friend's weed vape, because the first few hits, of course, I don't feel it. I need more.
I'm immune to this stuff, I guess. Yeah, been there.
Exactly. So I just kept like, I don't feel it. Whatever. I was fucking drunk, super high, and at this point it was 2 a.m. And in typical degenerate Taylor fashion, I was trying to drive home drunk. I would do this frequently. Sometimes I would wake up in my car in the parking lot, not having any recollection how I got back to base. So my friends would have to knock on the door, wake me up at like 7 a.m., be like, hey, we got to go to work. How did I get here? And driving onto a Marine Corps base, they have to check your ID. Like, they look at you, talk to you, make sure you're coherent. So I just got so good at pretending to be sober that I could be blackout drunk and be totally fine, which is not a skill that I recommend. Doing,
exactly.
That's what happened.
It happened.
Yeah. So this is what I was doing. I tried to grab my keys. Thankfully, I was with good friends who tried to prevent me from that. But in the, my ego was so big at the time. I basically said, like, fuck you, I'm going to do what I want. When they tried to put me to bed, I was like, no, I'm driving home. So I snuck down. grabbed my keys off the counter, walked outside. I was barefoot, so I didn't have any shoes on, but I was wearing like nice pants and a nice dress shirt. Started to walk back to my car. And at some point, I just got this idea that I wanted to climb houses. Why not? Let's go on an adventure. So, of course, that's what I did. I started to climb, scale the sides of these beach houses, and I came to one where their bathroom window was open. And I'm on an adventure, so let's continue the adventure. Yeah. I went in their bathroom window. I'm now in this person's house, and I walk out the bathroom, look to the right, up the stairs to the third story. There's a dog laying upstairs. The dog and I make eye contact. I'm like, oh shit, is this dog gonna bark, cause chaos? Nope, the dog just sat there. So I just closed the door very silently, continued to walk and explore the house. I came to what looked like a girl's room. The light was on, nobody was in there. And there was this other little nook up there. I was like, oh, that looks like a cool place. Let me go explore that. I went up there, and this time there was a girl sleeping in her bed. I would guess late teens. And I wasn't expecting to encounter anybody. And so in the time that I'm processing this, like I froze. I was like, okay, what do I do now? What's my plan? I had no devious intentions.
Mm-hmm. You're just curious.
Exactly. And then she woke up. She looked at me, she like kind of rubbed the sleep out of her eyes. She's like, who are you? I'm Taylor. We met at a party. She's like, when? It's like, tonight. I was like, or she was like, no, I didn't go to a party. I was like, oh, it was last night. She's like, nope, I don't know who you are. I'm going to call the cops. I said, no, that's okay. I'm just I'll leave. So I went down her bedroom, out the bathroom window, the way I came, hopped down to the street, and started booking it back to my car. As I'm running, I think that was really weird. I'm going to go back and apologize to this poor girl, except I'm going to do it via rooftop. So now I climb onto the rooftops of these beach houses, these 3-story beach houses, like 3 stories from the ground. And I'm jumping now from rooftop to rooftop back to this girl's house. So landing on the other side, shingles shattering, falling down, 2:30 a.m. The people inside must have thought it was like a freaking meteor shower or something.
Yeah, or a chupacabra or something.
Just causing a ruckus. And so at this point, I feel like I'm living a dream. Mm-hmm. It's essentially a lucid dream to me, because I've never experienced the state of, being crossfaded, blackout drunk, and super high. And I came to this one gap that was pretty substantial. And I was like, okay, well, I'm in a dream. Nothing can hurt me. I'm going to go for it. So I got a running start, made it to the other side. But when I landed, there was this loud pop. And that literally and figuratively sobered me up. I was like, okay, I'm in fact not in a dream. Something just happened to my ankle. This adventure is over. Mm-hmm. I've taken this too far. So I lowered myself down from the roof. Thankfully, they had a staircase leading out back. So I lowered myself down to that, hobbled out their backyard gate, and then hobbled the rest of the way back to my car. Woke up in my car about 7 a.m., drove back to base with my left foot because my right foot was fucked. A few days later, I went to get an x-ray, and sure enough, it was broken. And that would cause me to miss my second deployment with my fellow Marines who this deployment had the potential to be a combat deployment. And so it was devastating for me that I wouldn't be there in case something happened. Mm. Not only that, but I also realized that the path that I was on was not where I wanted to go. Drinking every weekend, playing video games, not really doing anything productive with my life. Mm-hmm. And so I used this again to sober me up. I quit drinking for 2 years. I started reading. Up until that point, I always despised reading. I had never read a book in my life. So started reading educational books, listening to educational podcasts, started taking online college courses. And so I had a cast on my leg, and I thought, if I can't walk on my feet, I'm going to learn to walk on my hands. So I taught myself how to handstand walk, and I still trained legs. I made no excuses, right? So that was really the catalyst, a complete 180 to where now everything that I was doing was for personal development, was to make myself better. So that was the main catalyst.
Dude, I love that too, because what I heard in that too was not only all the amazing stuff that you had already said regarding what you learned from that, the lessons, the wisdom, etc., but also, like Terrence McKenna said, you got the message and you hung up the phone for a while, right? There was a time where it was like, okay, I don't need any more of that. I got the message, right? And I think for a lot of people with psychedelics, they forget that part, and I'll be the first to admit, I forgot that part for a long time, specifically with cannabis, where it was an every night thing. And why was it every night? Well, I did it last night, I did it the night before, and I'm going to do it tomorrow night. So why not tonight?
Might as well.
There was no other thought to it except that. Now, the funny thing for me was that I wasn't making necessarily poor life choices at that point, other than not doing what my purpose was. So it's actually a very poor choice, but it just wasn't as dangerous or reckless. Like I was always, when I was growing up, my friends would do really stupid shit. And I was always the one that knew their inherent risk and would be like, yeah, I'll watch you guys from the bushes, when they'd climb on the school roof behind my house or do crazy shit. And so I always had enough awareness. And that was one thing that anxiety really helped me with. Right. Because anxiety was like that thing that was like, I don't know, what if it goes wrong? And I was like, you're right. What if it goes wrong? And so I'd always stay a little bit back. But when it came to less reckless choices, but still with a serious negative outcome, it was like daily interacting with cannabis, playing video games, working in a job that I didn't like, but instead of actually doing something to change it, just bitching about how the job was bullshit. It was like this complete externalization of power.
Yeah.
And it wasn't cannabis that did it. It wasn't video games that did it. It wasn't anything I was doing. It was me.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you said. It was like, it was me interacting with these things, right? Alcohol is not inherently bad, right? People might say, yes, it's poison. So technically, inherently, it might be poisonous, right?
There's a way to use it.
Yeah, exactly. But you drink one glass of wine once a month, it's not going to kill you, right? So like,
in fact, it can actually have longevity benefits. There's studies from the blue zones, these people who do drink wine, in Italy is a good example where they don't use pesticides and they're primarily using dry farming methods to where it's slightly less alcohol, significantly less sugar, and no poison in the alcohol.
Yeah.
So that can have health benefits. And also if you use alcohol to come together more socially, because it raises GABA, which is the inhibitory neurotransmitter. So you're able to open up a little bit more. So yes, alcohol can absolutely be used in a beneficial sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, no objective reality, right? Yeah. So people are like, oh, alcohol didn't work for me, so therefore it's bad. It's like, no, it might be bad for you, right? Like at this point in your life, but that is subject to change too, right? Because for instance, for you, right, like at that point, alcohol was really bad in your life. Yes. But now I saw you drink a glass of wine the other night, and guess what? You're not climbing on houses, you're not breaking your ankle, right? Like, so there was something learned there that you integrated, and now you can take that when it's the right time for it, right? If everyone's having a glass of wine, you're like, okay, I'll have one.
That's why I did it. Is because I was down here working. I was like, okay, I want to get into more a relaxed state. So then when I finish work, I can go up and be more social. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened. Just one glass, boom. Done.
Exactly. And that's intention and also integration, because you knew if I have 5 or 6 of these, it's going to be poison now, right?
Yeah.
But in this dose, I'm considering it medicine.
Yeah.
And again, there's no objectiveness to what separates a medicine from a poison other than how it's actually making your life go, right? Or how you're making your life go as a result of interacting with it. And that's like the biggest thing I tell, the people I coach with cannabis. I'm like, listen, the faster you can get to the point of realizing that no matter what you want to blame in your life for how your life is going, it's ultimately you. The faster you can get to that point, even though it'll sting, right? Yes, it'll sting at first, but on the other side is a world of freedom, because once you've made that choice, you'll make it again and again and again. And every time you have to make it, it'll be a little less stingy because you'll know that you're getting your shit together. And now there might be another level where you admit, okay, that's me, right? But you're already used to doing it,
It is the most empowering realization that you can come to.
Yes.
Understanding that everything, and I mean literally everything in your life, is 100% your fault. And if it's, not your fault, it's at least 100% within your control how you respond to that situation.
Exactly.
Ultimately, the antithesis of the victim mentality, taking 100% ownership of everything. And that's ultimately what being the captain of your own life means.
Yes.
Steering your own ship to where you want to go.
100%.
Not relying on anybody else, or not letting external circumstances or ridiculous mandates prevent you from doing what it is that you want to do.
Yeah. And, I've worked with clients that, have been molested, have been raped, etc. And I'm like, they're like, oh, so is that my fault? I'm like, no, it's not necessarily your fault, but how you choose to view it. Now that it's already happened, you can't take it back. It's already happened. That part is where your responsibility is. And I know it's fucking hard, right? I'm not sitting here being like, oh, it's all love and light, it's totally fine.
Yeah.
But it's a very important decision because I've had very close friends that have gone through things like that. And the ones that have come out going, fuck it, it happened. And yeah, I wish it never happened, but it did.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna take ownership of this and say that because that happened, now I get to go do deep inner work. I get to do this healing. I can connect with other people that have been raped, have been molested, etc., and I can help them. That's how I'm choosing to view it. Again, you can't change what's already happened, but you can choose your perspective on that event. And that's what I really feel when it comes to like, that saying, like, it's all your fault, right? Like, I truly believe that. And I wanted to throw that in there because I imagine people listening will be like, what about those things? And it's like, listen, those events happen and there's some shitty people in the world, straight up, right? But at the end of the day, you get to be the captain of your own life and see and choose how you're going to view that event moving forward.
Yeah.
Because again, like, with my dad going through cancer and dying in my arms, right? Like, that's not something that I want to view as my fault, right? But if I was choosing to let that fuck up the entire rest of my life, that would be my fault, But now when other people talk about their parents passing away, I can connect with them and I have an opportunity to relate to them. And now they'll actually listen to me more because I've gone through it too.
Yeah.
And so again, everything can be a blessing in disguise. It's not objectively a blessing in disguise because it depends on how you choose to view it. But again, like, these are all really important things to know in the psychedelic space, because if you are someone who doesn't understand that concept and then you go into a psychedelic experience, you can come out being fractured and being disintegrated, where now you're having challenge actually living your day-to-day life because you don't know how to contextualize that experience and how it applies and integrates into your day-to-day life. And so again, it's like great power, great responsibility.
Yeah. I don't believe that there are shitty people in the world. I believe that there are people who do shitty things. I believe that there are people who, based on their current knowledge and circumstances and past programming
and trauma and whatnot,
led them to be this person who they are now. I don't believe that they are inherently shitty people.
Agreed, actually. Yeah.
And I do believe that, at least in some sense, if you are raped or attacked, you can be drawing that to you. You can be attracting that based on your stories and the energy that you are putting out there.
Yeah.
So if you view yourself as a victim and you have a lot of hatred, for example, for whatever it is, that is the energy that you are putting out there. And I learned this through the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza. You can manifest different situations in your life. So if you are feeling anger and hurt and frustration, you are, of course, going to draw in people who are also experiencing those feelings, and you can draw that experience too. And people who are victims of those types of things, they don't like to hear that because they're like, are you saying this is my fault? No. And in a way, potentially. And this is where it's empowering, because if you don't want that to happen again, change your energy.
Yes.
Change your circumstances, change who you are surrounding yourself with.
Change your belief systems, right? Change your stories, right? Like, do the work necessary to make sure that like is attracting like. Because this is like, I'm really glad you brought this up, because for most people, and I'll put myself in this category, for me, right, to make it more personal, for a long time, I didn't know why I was having shitty things happen to me, right? And now that language is very important. Having shitty things, right? That's the subject matter, happen to me, not for me, to me, right? And then when I started realizing and taking ownership over this, I realized, okay, maybe, soft-talking knowledge, maybe this has something to do with me. Then I started diving into it and started seeing other people that have come to the point where they've realized, hey, this is a me thing, and they've worked on it to come out the other side, which is what a coach, mentor, guide, healer, whatever you want to call it, is meant for. So I could see the final result of what would happen or what could happen if I took that type of belief system on, and I liked it, right? And so for me, that's what allowed me to get into that, because, Mike Bledsoe said something to me that was really potent during the pandemic, which I was already seeing personally, my belief system through the veil of that. But he was saying, there's a lot of people saying a lot of things right now. The only way to know who to listen to is who's getting the results that you actually want in your life, right? And so, like, for me, when it came to taking ownership over my life, it wasn't something that I was like, you know what? I'm going to take ownership over everything, even though I don't believe it. It wasn't that I didn't believe it. It was just that I didn't have any examples in my life up until a certain point of people that had lived the other side. Now, I had spent plenty of time living my life as the victim, and that sucked, right? It was leading me to numb out with cannabis. It was leading me to drink on the weekends. It was leading me to make, it's exhausting. And it wasn't leaving me anything empowered. Then I looked at the other way of people that were like, yeah, dude, I know it fucking stings, but if you take ownership, your life will get better. And I saw what was happening in their life. And I was like, well, the evidence speaks for itself.
Yeah.
And so I took that road, and everyone gets to make that decision for themselves. And so I imagine I speak for both of us here when I'm saying that we're not here saying that you need to do it this way, but we're here having lived both sides and saying it just seems as though this side is much more fun and much more joyous and much more empowering.
Yeah.
And that's the important thing.
That was a common misconception that people had when I first started the captain's lifestyle and started calling myself, the Captain Morgan, whatever. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, you want us to live your lifestyle like you think you're this, perfect person and you've got everything figured out? Absolutely not. I am the captain of my own life. I want you to be the captain of your own life and live your lifestyle. Mm-hmm. This is how I'm doing it. This is how I have experienced benefit. This is how I have become more healthy, happy, and fulfilled, productive. If you do some of the things that I'm doing, you can achieve that for yourself.
Yes.
So that's where my brand has been built, and I've created the captain's code and different things for people to start living this way. And I want to touch on this before I forget. It's important to talk about surrendering, whether that's in a psychedelic experience, whether that's in an ice bath or an emotionally traumatizing experience that you find yourself in. Because you said this, any feeling felt fully is bliss.
Yes.
Right? Jason Campbell.
Joseph Campbell.
Yeah, Joseph Campbell.
Joseph Campbell. Bliss is any emotion felt all the way through.
There you go.
Yep.
So like in the ice bath, I give this example. It's going to suck as much as you allow it to suck. Mm-hmm. Like if you're in the ice bath and you're thinking how much this sucks, how cold it is, how bad you want to get out and get into the sauna, that experience is going to be grueling. You're going to be just so tense and tight and
just thugging it out.
Exactly. Which that can be good to experience.
There's a time to thug it out
at some points, but you can make any experience so much better by simply breathing and then surrendering to that experience. So for the ice example, cold is just a feeling, right? So if you can
I heard you say that the other day and I was like, game recognized game, dude. It's not pain. It's just a sensation.
It's just a sensation. You get to determine whether or not that is good or bad, right? You can choose whether or not you're going to be the victim of that cold or whether or not you can surrender to it. And so some mindset hacks that I tell people is, what ifing the good stuff?
Yes.
What if I could surrender into this ice bath? What if I could enjoy this experience? What if I could go 30 seconds longer? So in whatever experience this is, and you just broke up with your ex, or she broke up with you, that, can be very difficult for people. And the more that you try to escape that experience or wish it was different in some way, or wish it
shoulda, woulda.
Exactly. The more that you think about those things, the more discomfort you will feel. And the more that you can surrender to that, it doesn't mean that you will feel comfortable. It means that you will be at peace with where you are.
Yes.
And then you take ownership and action dispels overwhelm, and then you can work through it.
Yeah, 100%. I'm so glad you brought that up because, again, it's like we've been saying the whole time, things simply happen, yet they're neutral, right? They're objectively neutral, but it's what meaning and belief system and everything we put onto it that makes it either good or bad or positive or negative. And when it comes to ice baths or the breakups or anything like that, again, like you said, it's not about not feeling the feelings associated with it. You can be like, yeah, I really wish this breakup didn't happen, yet it did. And so what can I learn from it other than the fact that if I can get back with that person and work it out, great. But at this point, we're separated. So what can I do from this point to learn and gain wisdom and actually be a better person as a result of it?
One of my favorite quotes is from Shakespeare in Hamlet. He wrote, "Nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so."
100%, dude. That's one of my favorite quotes of all time. I didn't know it came from Hamlet, but I knew it was Shakespeare.
Yep.
And the other one is Albert Einstein. You can't solve a problem from the same level of thinking that created it. But what do I do all the time? And I imagine some of you listening do the same thing. I imagine you do the same thing sometimes. I get stuck into thinking that, thinking, but to go farther into it, I keep thinking unconsciously, what will make this traffic jam in my head better? Let's put more cars into it, And it's like, it sounds fucking crazy. And I can say it right now and I'll still have it happen again. But at the same time, that is part of the human condition. We're here to be messy. We're here to color outside of the lines. And I think that when it comes to psychedelics, when it comes to any of these things, we have an opportunity to interact with any aspect of life to create heaven on earth or have hell happen to us, right? Where when you start getting into that coulda, shoulda, woulda, right? This breakup shouldn't have happened this way. It could have been better. All of that, that is you actually living in hell. Hell and heaven are not places we go after this world. They're states that we have the opportunity, if it's heaven, or the challenge, if it's hell, of embodying while we're actually in this life. And I think that's one of the biggest thirst traps with religion, is that like, oh, this experience is kind of like purgatory, and then we get to the real thing or the wrong thing, depending on how you look at it. And I think that, again, it's like, for me, what psychedelics have done for me, I mean, they've done a lot of things, but overall, they've allowed me to realize that, just like you said, I am the captain of my life. And with that great power comes great responsibility. Yet if I can always point the finger back at me instead of pointing it external, I have an opportunity. If I point it external, I'm having life happen to me. You know, and it sounds really attractive, right? The whole world's to blame. It's not me. But again, if you're doing that with every aspect of your life, you're going to be completely disempowered as a result.
I would like to tell another story.
Please. Let's go.
About this one time on psychedelics.
Let's go, bro.
Story about this tattoo.
Yeah, dude. Let's do it.
So this was a few months ago. I was in Venice Beach, California for, what was I? I was there for a photo shoot with Bioptimizers, actually. Which this hat says optimized human.
Yeah.
And then your brand highly optimized. Yeah. I love it.
The optimized word's going around a lot today.
Yep. Lifestyle optimization is something I throw around a lot.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
So
it's huge.
I was in Venice Beach, alone, and growing up, so this is something we get into. I was just on Nate's podcast and he asked me about this. So this is top of mind. In high school, I was always trying to fit in and to be a cool kid. Right? I always wanted to get invited to the parties. I wanted to be asked to smoke weed. I was never invited to do that. It's like all the cool kids were off doing that, and then like nobody ever thought to ask me, right? So I always wanted to fit in and do things with other people, because I thought that if I were to just go do something by myself, that would mean that I am a loser and that I am that loner, right? Exactly. And so my whole life, I had always waited, sometimes hours, for people to text me to come hang out, whatever it is that they're doing. So I spent many weekends staying up late, just waiting for
looking at the phone, like
just refreshing all the apps, like checking to see what's going on, you know, all of that. And I was just wasting my life. Waiting for somebody else to invite me to a situation, right? So that had gone on my whole life. I never went on any solo travel or anything like that. So now I'm in Venice by myself, and I'm just now learning that it's okay and actually a lot more fun to just be with myself and go experience life on my own, to do whatever it is I want to do and not wait for anybody to come with me or to invite me to somewhere. So I'm sitting down at this restaurant, and I smoked weed before, and I'm sitting down alone, and I noticed myself getting really anxious. Like, what is everybody else thinking about me, that I'm here at this restaurant alone, eating by myself? What do they think about me? Right. And I caught myself and I was like, this is ridiculous. I know that I don't care about that. And I was like, I know what to do in this situation. And I took a breath. And as soon as I had that exhale, it was like this, the blanket of anxiety was lifted off of me, and I could see clearly again. I was like, oh, I just wasn't breathing.
Yeah.
And so I looked down and I was like, I should get that tattooed. That would be a great reminder, just all the time, to just breathe. Right. And so that night, actually, I went and got this tattooed, breathe, on my hand. And since then, it's been a fantastic reminder. Just every time seeing it, oh, breathe.
100%, dude. You know, I love that story too, because, you know, again, like, it is through direct experience that we learn, right? So you could have read a bunch of books on breath. You could have done all these things, which I imagine now you have, right? But like, a lot of the times it's through direct experience of actually applying our intellect and our knowledge into our direct experience of life that allows us to have a story to tell. right? And life all runs on stories. That's why I love this podcast so much and why I love podcasting in general, because it's really just storytelling done live in a format, in a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, like, that really allows me to see that, like, for instance, your tattoos have meaning to them, right? Like, when I was a kid, I almost got a Cowboys from Hell tattoo right here from Pantera, right? I fucking knew at 16 that I wanted it there forever. Thank fucking God my parents were a little smarter than I was at that point. Wink, wink, a lot smarter.
Yeah.
And they were like, why don't you wait until you're 18? And I was like, all right, cool. They didn't tell me not to do it. They were like, why don't you just wait? Because maybe there's something else even cooler you want there. They knew how to work with me on. I'm like, all right, yeah, you're right.
That's
my
good.
ego was like, fuck yeah. Maybe there's something even cooler, right? But it's cool because that has meaning to you, right?
Yeah.
And humans were meaning-making machines. And so I think that it's really important to have whatever it is in our lives that allows us to create meaning from, whether it be the podcast, the tattoo, the house, whatever it is, right? That allows us to actually like make memories there and create meaning. That's where it's important. I think a lot of people do it the other way around. And I did it for a long time too, where it's like, what can I do to seem cool, to seem like I fit in? Instead of like, how do I be myself and then share who I am? And that's how I quote unquote fit in. Because at the end of the day, I this is something I've just come up with in this moment, but it's not anything revolutionary. But I truly feel that if you feel like you have to fit in somewhere, you're not in the right spot. Like when I came to Unlifted, I've been very fortunate, at making friends my entire life. And I realized that that wasn't the case for everyone when I met other people, especially Rachel, because she had the story that she never had friends and all these things. And I was like, whoa, I'm really fucking lucky that I never had that story. Had plenty of other stories, just not that one. But throughout my life, especially when I was a teenager, there were certain people that I felt like, I don't fit in there. And there was never a need to try to fit in, but I've seen a lot of other people go for that, right? And I'm not going to say there was no need to fit in, because I'd be lying if I said that. I'd be naive, because even the Cowboys from Hell tattoo, all that stuff was in a way me looking to fit in a little more, even with myself, right? Like fitting in for myself. Like, how silly is that, right?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't accept myself the way I was so much that I was trying to make myself more of what I thought at that point I was, which was a metalhead, a thrasher, a guitar player, right? And none of those things are inherently bad, but I was taking my meaning and my worth off of those things in my life rather than the person who had those things. It's a very different order there. And so I love that story, man, because it really brought that up for me. And so thank you for that download, bro. But dude, this has been an amazing episode, bro. I got to have you back on for round 2, because I feel like we only just got started, dude. But where can people find you? Where can they connect with you? Any upcoming things you have going on that you want to plug? Tell the people they can reach you, man.
Yeah. At Captain_Taylor_Morgan on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Those are my primary content platforms. The Captain's Lifestyle Podcast on all podcast platforms. And then I would encourage everybody to download the Captain's Code. It's the basic articles by which I live and by which I encourage everybody else to live if they want to start to become the captain of their own life. And how I explain it is, if you find yourself stuck, revert back to the code, because each letter of Captain's Code corresponds with a pillar of lifestyle optimization. The C is cold exposure. The A is affirmations. Let me just make sure I'm getting this right. The P is play with life. The T is train, both your mind and your body. The A is accept what you cannot control. The I is inspire others. The N is nasal breathing. The S is sunlight. The C is connect, both with the earth and with other human beings.
We all.
Right.
Yeah.
The O is observe your thoughts, feelings, and actions. The D is delegate tasks to others. And the E is eat real food. So really, I feel like that encompasses the basics of what it is to live a healthy, happy, and productive life.
Yeah, you know why I love that is because you're allowing people to build a strong foundation.
Yeah.
And if you have a strong foundation, you can fucking stack that skyscraper as high as you want. But if you have a shaky foundation, no matter how big you build your building, it's going to fucking fall down.
Yep.
Make sure you send me that. We'll put it in the show notes too for
sure.
everyone. So
sweet.
Hell yeah, dude. Great share.
Appreciate it.
Guys, hope you enjoyed it. If you do, give Taylor a follow. He's doing gangster shit out there. And come back soon. Give me a subscribe, follow, whatever you guys want to do. Love you guys. Peace.